the dashboard is dead, right? Like, we're never going to use dashboards again. They're all dead.
Hear it all the time.
I do not believe it. And the reason why I don't believe it is because dashboards are sense making. And if you have not
Mhm.
been oriented to a data set, you need to have some basic understanding of what it covers and what are the questions it answers. And if you had to go into a chatbot and ask every one of those questions that you can answer immediately and visually on the dashboard, it would take you 10 to 15 minutes.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the next episode of Build and Breakthrough, the podcast where we celebrate founders' successes and struggles. I'm Hunter Harris, your host. With me today is Ellie Fields. She's the CEO and co-founder of Ridge AI, an AI-enabled analytics platform, the former chief product and engineering officer at SalesLoft, and her company, Ridge AI, actually recently announced their pre-seed raise of $2.6 million earlier this month. Although there's a very interesting story behind that I'm hoping we're going to have the opportunity to get into today. Ellie, you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, thanks. Happy to be here, Hunter. I'm a big data geek. Is probably the first thing for people to know about me, and excited to be starting a company in the age of AI because there's a lot to explore and a lot to reinvent in data.
Absolutely. So, kicking it off, do you have any questions for me?
I do have a question for you, actually. You're interviewing founders at one of the most interesting times to found a company. What has surprised you about what founders tell you, kind of across the board?
That is a really interesting question. I will say that this is probably a surprising answer too, but I really feel like I was spoiled, incredibly spoiled, by having the opportunity to work at Silverpop, at SalesLoft, at Calendly, and Syndoso. I feel like I want to say that I made some intentional choices to like pick winners, but I got incredibly lucky. And I have to say that the view of the space overall, just how raw it can be, is vastly different from the experience that I got from working at really prestigious, really well funded, really intentionally built startups. Because I have to say, a lot of startups that I worked with and for in the interim since then have not really had that same level of intentionality behind them. And now with AI too, like it's really wild. There's a ton of people that are spilling over into the building space,
Hmm.
which I'm incredibly excited about. I love the opportunity that people can go and build stuff, but also these tools do have sharp edges. And I'm definitely seeing a lot of people cutting themselves on the sharp edges. So it's a really interesting space. It's moving. I mean, I'm
No,
preaching
I
to the choir
agree.
here, right? Like it's moving so fast. A great example of this too is this week, or sorry, last week actually, with the release of Opus 4.7. I really feel like we're at another moment like the release of, I think it was ChatGPT 5 last summer, where it was like things are changing now. I had a lovely grace period of feeling like I understood the market between a few months after the ChatGPT 5 release and Opus 4.7 release. But now it feels like we're kind of in untrodden territory again for the time being.
100%.
So your background, I think you started in Microsoft for a number of years. You were at Tableau for, I think, over a decade, and then you were
Right
at
there.
SalesLoft. How startup-y was Tableau at the time? What was in your head when you decided to make the leap from even SalesLoft?
Yeah. I mean, Tableau was under 100 people when I joined, and it
Okay,
was very
so pretty
startup-y.
startup-y.
And yeah, it was pretty small. Nobody knew who we were. I joined right before the financial crisis, so then we were still growing, but tried to conserve cash. So we just kept growing without hiring people. And so that team became very tight. So it's very startup in that way. I would say that it was also a very well run company. And most people who are at Tableau will tell you that. I mean, to your earlier comments about you're lucky you were at well run companies, even though we were under 100 people and nobody knew who we were for a few years, except our early customers and so on. It just felt like a place where it was run by adults. We were working hard, we were working together, but it wasn't utter chaos. And
Right.
people acted like big kids and treated each other with respect. And people weren't out drinking until 3 o'clock in the morning every day. It was like that startup, I don't know, myth.
Stereotype.
It was not Tableau. People had fun and so on, and I would say SalesLoft was a well-run company as well. When I left there, I went to SalesLoft partly because I saw a great workflow company that needed data, and obviously I'd been doing a lot of data, and
Hmm.
as I said, I'm a data geek, And I truly believe in the power that data has to change organizations, help us have great conversations in the world at large. And I saw an opportunity to bring data to the workflow at SalesLoft. And we did that for a number of years, and I think we're successful at it. And when I left there, I wanted to take about a year off. So I took a week in between those two stints. That was 16 years in total, and I had two children along the way. And so just to give you an idea, I had not had a lot of time to like read a book and take my kids to school and things like that. So I took a few months off and was very happy to let that continue for quite a while. But I started talking to my co-founder Jeff Hare, who is long time in this space, has built some of the foundational technologies, have been part of building some of those over the last couple of decades. And we couldn't get off this topic of how data on the web is just maybe gone back in the last decade.
Interesting. Can you elaborate?
And I mean, if you need to get data on the web, say you're a product company and you need to get reporting out, dashboards out to show the value of what you're building to your end customers, it's very common,
Classic.
right? So you're building a platform, you're innovating on it, you're creating new kinds of value, and customers don't really believe that until they see their users using it. They see, their sales cycles getting shorter if that's what you're trying to do, or their hiring cycles getting faster, or whatever your the job to be done of your software. It's
Hmm.
incumbent upon you as a product company to show those results to your end users. And typically people
Absolutely.
do that with data. And they put data on the web. And there's lots of reasons to put data on the web. I mean, governments put open data on the web so you can understand things happening out there. But if you look at that ecosystem, I was part of providing those solutions at Tableau and proud of what we did there. But, it hadn't changed in a decade. And Tableau was state of the art when we were doing that. I was a customer of those solutions at SalesLoft, and we actually ended up building our own in-house. It took quite a while. And so Jeff had been working on this highly performant browser-based architecture, which basically took load times and interaction times from 10 seconds to sub-second. And I had been thinking about how do you use AI to flatten the learning curve of analytics. Like you
Right.
still really needed an expert to kind of create some of these analytics for people. And there was so much happening in the space, and we just kind of got hooked on this idea of building something that we both wanted to exist, and that's how Ridge AI was created.
That makes sense. I mean, I will speak to that problem a little bit myself. Uh, Traditionally, as an engineer, I've been, uh, shall we say, metrics focused. I'm always very interested in understanding, like, hey, why are we doing this thing? What is the purpose? What is the ROI, right?
Mhm.
And that's always an issue that I keep on recurring to because so many organizations that I talk to, they there's lip service to data, but I find that many organizations, they like having the data so that they can make a decision and then find the data after the fact to justify the decision instead of doing the opposite, which is actually having that data function and that data expertise to be able to actually understand the story that data may be telling you, the trends, the averages, what have you. I'm not an expert here, but I'm an avid consumer more than a producer, if you will. But being able to take that information and have it tell you a story, and based on that story, reach some conclusion that hopefully pushes your business in a better trajectory.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And I think companies are really good about talking about their value proposition, which is great, but really showing, not telling.
Hmm.
That's where the rubber hits the road. It's also where your customers find a chance to figure out where they could be doing more with your product, or where it
Very
isn't
true.
working as they expected, or it is working better than they expected. And this becomes really important at renewal time, right? When they're asking the
Absolutely.
question, are we even getting any value from this thing? It's nice to be able to show that, yes, you are, in fact, and this is the exact value you're getting for these kinds of
Yes.
people.
Yes, like we have specifically moved the needle on your revenue by this amount by doing these activities, which is shown by this particular story
Right,
or something like
right.
that, right? So
Absolutely.
when you were originally building, you were building in stealth, right? Actually, you're one of the first like later stage people that I've talked to that have actually built in stealth. Because I talk to a lot of people and I'm like, don't build in stealth. What was your thought process in choosing to go down the stealth path versus kind of like more publicly building and starting telling people about the opportunity early and all of that?
Well, it's funny. The only reason we were really in stealth was because we're so small that nobody cared about us. We
Okay,
actually had a
so
website. Yeah, we had a website. We were recruiting customers, but when you're that small, we were kind of de facto stealth, if you know what I mean. We
okay,
weren't really
so it's
trying to
not
keep
stealth,
things.
it's stealth, right?
Yeah, it was pre-launch. We weren't doing anything outbound. We weren't doing
Gotcha.
intentional marketing. I mean, we got a website up early simply so that the design partners, early customers we reached out to, didn't think we were hackers trying to,
Yeah,
so
of
that we could
course.
explain ourselves and, show that we're credible people and that we're building something. It was really more of a calling card, but it was, no, we had no marketing budget. We weren't prospecting. We weren't doing any of those things. We were working with early customers to try and refine the product to the point where we could get to a launch, which is what we did a few weeks ago.
Yes. And so what was that overall journey like? Were there notable pivots through that? Like, what were some of the learnings that you had as you went through that process of dialing in with those earlier customers?
I think it really helped us understand where people in the market saw value. So
Hmm.
we didn't do the company's about a year old. We didn't do any massive pivots in that we changed the entire thing we were building. I mean, we're building something fairly extensive. It's data
Hmm.
infrastructure, and so if we're pivoting every month and a half, we're not going to get very far. But we did. As I would talk to customers and show them what we had, I found resonance in a few things. I found resonance in the ability to deploy and have something be really performant because
Hmm.
that's where legacy products fell apart. I mentioned this kind of 10-second to sub-second. People don't use interactivity if it takes you 10 seconds to get a response. I mean, we know that on the web, and we kind of conveniently ignore that fact with data because not many products let you get sub-second response. But people don't interact with and ask additional questions if it's too slow. And so having a great story about deploying, not taxing infrastructure like Snowflake and so on, not creating massive compute bills. That's what browser-based infrastructure gives us. And that was very resonant. I found another thing that was resonant was this idea of having a data agent alongside a dashboard. And if you're anywhere near data, you've heard this debate, the dashboard is dead, right? Like we're never going to use dashboards again. They're all dead.
Hear it all the time.
I do not believe it. And the reason why I don't believe it is because dashboards are our sense making. And if you have not been oriented to a data set, you need to have some basic understanding of what it covers and what are the questions it answers. And if you had to go into a chatbot and ask every one of those questions that you can answer immediately and visually on the dashboard, it would take you 10 to 15 minutes to get.
Exactly. You're touching on something that I keep on coming back to, talking to a number of founders, both in the podcast and offline, but the ergonomics of agents is something that's super interesting to me because who really interacts with data through a conversational interface, for example, right? Like, what's the saying? A picture's worth a thousand words, right? Like, the thought that dashboards are dead now are like just static dashboards and certain SaaS solutions that are rigidly defined, just consuming particular fields off of Snowflake or something like that. Is that dead? Might
Maybe.
be headed that way if it's not that way already. But the ability to visualize something is just kind of like a core part of how humans are visually wired, right? Like we're
Absolutely,
vision
yeah.
first for the most part. Some people accept it, of course, but like the ability to lay out data in a sensible way just allows you to synthesize the data much more rapidly and also allows you to reach certain discrete conclusions that you might not even think to ask an agent about. Now, of course, the flexibility of an agent, as I believe you alluded to, having a agent that's able to do something like go through your data and extemporaneously generate dashboards for a certain set of queries or a certain line of questioning or something like that. That's a vastly different proposition. Now, do those still potentially need to be longer lived? Probably. But not having to go and build the whole dashboard yourself seems like a massive value proposition right there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that learning curve to build a good dashboard takes a long time. And so
Hmm.
I totally agree with you that the data agent form factor is so powerful for the long tail question. Being able to ask in natural language is so powerful. We pair a data agent and dashboard because you
Hmm.
get that visual sense making and you get the data agent. And I think what you were talking about, I think of it as the human data interface. Right? There are many layers of the data stack, and a lot of data products have to talk to each other. But at the end of an agentic workflow or any kind of workflow, at some point, a human being needs to understand data. And there's a
Absolutely.
lot of research that shows that we can understand orders of magnitude more visually than we can by trying to read through a chart or read a bunch of numbers or what have you. So we should leverage that.
Hmm.
But I agree with you. Bad dashboards are probably dead. There's no reason to have a
Thousand
bad
percent.
dashboard. But if you can create a great dashboard without having to be an expert in 5 different domains like data best practice and front end tool use and data engineering and all these things, and then you can pair it with a data agent for the end users of that, and then deploy it performantly and seamlessly and
Hmm.
connect it to your data and refreshing and so on, we're finding that people are really excited about that. And there was always the promise of that in legacy tools, but it never really came home.
Yeah, I'm sure the performance considerations were a big break on the success of that, because I know for my part I've used things like Snowflake, or I guess more frequently it's tools like pgadmin, or I think it's Mongoose for generating queries versus MongoDB records, and just generating some sort of query and then having to come back 5 minutes or 30 minutes later once all of my data is pulled back. Then once you have it, trying to figure out how to send that data off somewhere else to visualize it in some capacity. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
performance
brutal.
is huge.
Yeah, it's one of those invisible things that you can't go and just sell a product on performance these days, but it's the experience of using it where people either will use it or won't based on performance. It's one of those invisible things that has to be there.
I believe when I was at Sales Loft, the design team referred to that as delight, essentially, where you may be interacting with a particular platform and you're like, okay, cool, whatever. But then there's just some hidden capability or something that you're just not quite acclimated to that just hits you and you're like, oh wow, it does this. And I feel like that sort of big performance, like orders of magnitude changeover, is definitely something where if I experienced that, I would be like, oh wow, I can do this now. I imagine it's the same sort of delight factor that a lot of people see with certain agents as well, where they're like, now there's this new capability that's unlocked by this level of performance. So I wanted to make sure that I dug into one thing. So you mentioned the company being a year old. We were talking about this pre-show briefly, but you mentioned that actually the fundraising round that you just announced, actually you received the fundraising last year,
Yeah.
actually before you started fundraising. So can you run me through that story? Because closing a round before you start a round is not something that I've heard of before. And I feel like that would be something very valuable for other people to hear about.
Yeah. It was went like this. Jeff and I decided to start the company, and at first we wanted to bootstrap it. We wanted, we had the ability to do that, and we thought we'll just take our time and build this company. We both very much wanted to build something well and right, and solve some of the deeper, long-standing problems like this inability to ask follow-up questions. We're lucky to have had some relationships here in Seattle, where we're based, with a number of people who we either worked with in the past at companies like Chris Stolte of Tableau, or the Madrona folks. It's a venture firm up here. They've been really great partners to us. And he and I both know a couple of people over there. When they knew we were getting together to start something, they kept saying, hey, let us know when you're going to fundraise. Let us know when you're going to fundraise. We're kind of like, well, we're going to bootstrap. I said, well, what if we just sent you a term sheet? What if we just did that? And, Jeff and I talked, and we were starting to see the potential here and starting to talk to early customers and see how much could be here. And I think there's a lot of value to bootstrapping, but the market is also moving very quickly now. And we saw the
Incredibly
need
quickly.
to go a little faster and bring on a couple of people. And I didn't want to ask people to quit their job and work for nothing. I mean, I was willing to do that, but it's different to ask somebody else to do that. And so we thought, we need to. Why don't we take a little bit of money, bring a couple of people on, see what we can build, and so we decided to take the funding. And I will say that we took a number of angel investors, people like I said, who we've worked with in the past, the Madrona funding, and another small group called the Founder VC. There are 3 people in that, all of whom have been founders themselves, and we took every one of them for a specific reason. And I would say it's been a great investor group for us.
Absolutely. Do you mind speaking to some of like the additional capacity that you got aside from like the funds to hire? But it sounds like I mean, the quintessential reason why you get angel funds is not just for their funds, it's for the angel's expertise or connections or what have you. Do you mind speaking a little bit about that? Because I feel like a lot of founders I talk to, they get kind of caught up on the dollar amounts and not kind of the other things that angels especially really provide to them?
Yeah, I mean, we look at our early investors as our advisors, and many of them were founders of other tech and data companies like Tableau, like Trifacta, OctoML. There's founder of Cloudera is in our investor group. And if anyone's interested, it's all listed on a blog post who's in there. Some early executives from Tableau, Kelly Wright and Elisa Fink, who helped build out their go-to-market team. And so I think I've called every single investor at some point and said, hey, I want to show you our product, or I want to tell you how we're thinking about going to market. We have Frank Dale in there, who I worked with at SalesLoft, a great product thinker. And all of these folks have been really willing to get on the phone with us and, give us feedback, give us a reflection of what's going on. And it's been incredibly valuable.
So where to next? It would be asking like, how did the funding change things? But you got the funding a year ago, and now we have like the full announcement and everything. So where's the trajectory from here?
We're continuing to build product. I mean, there's so much to do in this space. And
Mhm.
if you really just think about the web as the universal communication mechanism and then look at the state of data on the web, it's pretty poor. It's
Yeah,
hard to get data there. The data doesn't work well when you're there. So we're really trying to think about what does it mean to be a presentation layer for data on the web. And as you might expect, there's quite a bit of exciting things to build in that vein. So we're continuing to build the product. After the launch, we were very excited to have had a lot of interest. So we have a lot of people on the closed beta list. We're letting them in week by week, and we're going to have to up our pace because we got quite a few people out there, and we don't want them to wait too long. But a lot of interest, a lot of people reaching out proactively and saying, "Hey, we've been trying products in this space, and nothing is quite doing it. We have a huge need here." So we're just going to keep trying to fill that need and make data on the web better.
very cool. Any thoughts towards a seed round?
We are not actively raising. I think just like our pre-seed round, it's always good to get to know investors over time,
Hmm.
because I think then you kind of know what value they can bring. They know who you are and what your track record is. So we'll take meetings occasionally with investors, but in more of a, hey, let's get to know each other kind of way. At some point, we may raise a seed, but we've been fairly conservative with the money that we have and made sure we have a bit of runway.
It's good to hear that you're keeping some powder dry. I mean, as you were alluding to with how quickly the market is changing these days, like who knows what's going to be happening 3 months from now, where you may need to deploy additional capital to scale in different ways. Um, yeah, it's just really wild out there.
I know there are times businesses have to change and you have to let people go, and I mean, as a leader, I've had to do that. But the last thing I want to do is go hire 10 people and then let everyone go 6 months later. I mean, it just seems like a silly way to run a business. It's not something I personally want to do, because we're recruiting people that we respect and know and like, at least initially, and that's not a great thing to do.
Absolutely. And it's expensive to do too. I mean,
It
that
is.
is not necessarily the most efficient way to deploy capital if you have people still onboarding and then get rid of them, right? But I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you very much for taking this time with us. Do you want to plug some pluggables?
Yeah, I would say if anyone's interested in what we're doing, please head over to ridgedata.ai. That's ridgedata.ai. Sign up for the closed beta, and we will try to get you in as soon as possible. If you want to just talk with me about data, you can reach out to the email address on there, and I'm happy to jump on the phone and talk about data.
And I'll put your LinkedIn in the show notes as well as a link to ridgedata.ai as well. Well, Ellie, thank you so much for taking this time with us. I really appreciate it. This is such an interesting story of, starting something new, fundraising, and building something that sounds like an incredibly exciting product. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes next for y'all as you continue to scale the company. And to all the viewers, I hope that you've really enjoyed this episode. I hope that you've gotten a lot out of it, and I hope you all have a fantastic day. Peace.
Thanks, Hunter.